Have you ever sat in that heavy silence at a family dinner? Here on Women's Diaries Voice, we retell those moments honest every day, sometimes controversial. Every story is a mirror. Subscribe, join the conversation, and maybe find a little healing. My name is Lena Hart. I'm 34, and the last place I thought I'd be on a weeknight was the dining room where I learned to keep my face still. Crystal stems and white linen spread out like an operating table. Someone laughed too brightly at the head of the table, and then my mother's voice, cool as hospital tile, cut through the brightness. "You have had every advantage," Dr. Evelyn Park said, not looking at me so much as presenting me to the room. "And look what you've done with it." Forks paused in the air. A cousin coughed into a napkin. The chandelier hummed. I felt heat climb my throat in a slow, steady burn, but it didn't push me out of my chair. Years ago it would have. My mother directs cardiology at Crescent Mercy, a department that runs on schedules precise enough to shame metronomes. Rounds begin at 6:45, morbidity reports, at 7:10 coffee, at 7:12. Her shoes make a clean, low sound in the corridor, and interns straighten their backs before they see her. At home, the air tried to copy the hospital polished, controlled measurable. Our dinner talk was a taxonomy of rankings and outcomes. The word almost had no seat at the table. My father, Philip, negotiated contracts in paneled rooms and stacked his notes in tidy squared towers. You could hear his intention in his silences. My brother Daniel absorbed calculus like it was native to him. The guidance counselor kept a framed acceptance letter his senior year like it was a parish relic. I drew wireframes on the backs of placemats. I stole graph paper. I traced the flow of buttons no one else could see. When I was 12, I brought home an A.I. in biology. My mother circled the one question I'd missed with a red pen that didn't squeak. "This," she said evenly, "is why you will never practice medicine." It wasn't shouted. It didn't need to be. The sentence set like concrete in a slant I would keep hitting my shin against for years. After dinner, I sat on my bedroom rug, cracked my father's old laptop open, and taught myself how to make a page respond when you clicked it. The blue of the hyperlink felt like a door that didn't need a key. Through high school, I snuck color into empty grids the way other kids snuck out after curfew. I built a website for the school play with a donations thermometer that actually rose. I made a form that sorted volunteers without the vice principal's clipboard. When I left printouts on the kitchen counter, my mother skimmed them like vitals, quick, clinical, non-committal. "Art doesn't pay the mortgage," she would say, then add, "Be sensible," as if the first sentence were a weather report and the second a prescription. Sensible meant coats that snapped shut careers with initials, institutions that impressed strangers at cocktail hours. By senior year, the refrigerator was a medal display for Daniel's science fair ribbons, a letter from a summer lab, the photo where he looked like a boy receiving his future from a dean. My folder was the wrong color. The house grew colder in ways you couldn't measure. My father moved through the rooms like a soft echo telling me your mother wants the best, as if the phrase were a quilt that could go over anything. I stopped auditioning for a part that had never been open. I applied to a state university 3 hours south that had a small, stubborn program in computer science and digital media. When the acceptance came with a partial scholarship, my mother read it like a lab result that required immediate intervention. "No daughter of mine is going to throw herself away on doodles and computers," she said. Not angry, so much as refusing to recognize the item placed in front of her. "You go to Prime, or you wait. Those are the choices." I chose a door that wasn't on her list. The next morning, I packed 3 boxes and a coil of fear into a used hatchback that rattled at 40 miles an hour. My father stood in the driveway with his hands in his pockets, as if outdoors required permission. "Call when you arrive," he said. My mother didn't come out. The sky was so clean it looked staged. I drove south until the hospital billboards gave way to pawn shops and laundromats, and the kind of thrift stores that smell like old glue. Independence looked like a studio apartment with a stubborn radiator that hissed at 3 a.m. and a single window that faced a brick wall. The oven door didn't seal. I kept my heat on a timer, and my rent paid 2 days before it was due because the idea of owing anyone anything made my throat tight. I worked the early shift at a coffee shop where the espresso machine coughed steam like a locomotive, and my hair smelled like milk by 9 in the morning. At noon, I sold shoes to people who apologized for their feet. At night, I took any design job that didn't smell like a scam and watched lectures on human-computer interaction until my eyes sanded over. Syntax errors bit fast and healed slow. Sleep happened in rumor. Ambition was the only currency that cleared regardless of the hour. Community college classes covetously protected my GPA while I gathered the math I'd been told I could admire but not use. I discovered that Python fit in my hands the way some instruments fit in other people's hands, at first clumsy, then warm. Loops stopped feeling like the snake eating its tail and started feeling like language. In a required seminar on information architecture, the professor talked about respect as a design constraint, how a system should ask only for what it needs and return something honest in exchange. That sentence moved through my chest like a key turning. The campus didn't ask whether I was someone's shadow. It asked whether I could make the registration portal stop timing out when everyone hit it at the same minute. I could. The registrar hugged me with both arms, and a list of other things that broke. The first time my mother called, I picked up on the fourth ring. "How is your arrangement?" she asked, as if I'd moved into a tent behind a gas station. "Work is steady," I said, leaving out the part where I served coffee to men who snapped their fingers and then designed an intake flow for a free clinic that paid me in gift cards and gratitude. After that, we kept calls brief. Explaining felt like handing over my breath to be measured and found wanting. In the pauses we both produced, I built muscle. I needed more than slog. I needed a door that opened into a room I couldn't afford to enter yet. A flyer in the hallway announced a local tech conference with student day passes, and another line about volunteer posters accepted in exchange for admission. I stayed up building a poster about error states that respected the user instead of punishing them. I printed it at a copy shop that jammed 3 times and smelled like hot plastic. On the morning of the event, I pinned the poster to a foam board, slid it into a thrifted garment bag, and wore a sweater that looked braver than it felt. The badge they gave me hung crooked. I adjusted it and then left it crooked because it made me look like I had survived something without straightening every line. The keynote lights were surgical bright. In the audience, people typed into devices without looking down. On stage, the speaker moved through slides as if she were slipping cards through a dealer's hand. Afterward, a line formed that looked like devotion and logistics mixed together. I waited at the edge with my portfolio zipped open to the first screen. When Ariella Grant, the placard under the keynote photo read, "Garage to Growth Product Whisperer," stepped off the stage, she saw me adjust my zipper and move toward me, as if we had an appointment. She flipped through my screens in silence, stopping at a form with only 2 required fields and a line of gray text that promised to forget information it didn't need. "Most people decorate," she said finally. "You make decisions visible." Her voice carried none of the performance she had on stage. It was lower curious. She slid a white card out of her pocket with a handwritten address on the back. "Prototype this flow for me," she said. "Don't make it pretty. Make it honest. Show me where it breaks. I worked until sunrise. No gradients, no shadows. Just the path a hand would take across a screen and the places it would hesitate." I sent the file with a subject line that didn't try to sell itself. On Monday, there was a reply offering me a part-time seat in a product team with 2 rules: don't apologize for your curiosity, and don't defend a decision you haven't tested. In the mornings, I took classes. At noon, I stood in stand-ups where people spoke in verbs reduce, test, remove, measure. After dark, I committed code and commented my decisions like notes to a future I might forget. It was not glamorous. It was better. The office was a sublet with a window that looked into a parking garage. We kept whiteboards against the wall because we didn't have permission to screw anything in. The CEO's dog snored through meetings. I learned to ask dumb questions in a voice that didn't apologize beforehand. I learned that research can lie when it only asks permission from itself. I learned to price the value of a fix I could measure against a complaint I could hear. The first time a client changed a process because of something I'd recommended, I sat in the copy room. The room rearranged itself into polite clusters after my mother said family is everything, as if the sentence could hold us all in place like lacquer. Servers floated in with a pale soup and a whisper about celeriac. Conversation resumed with the frictionless quality of surfaces that had been buffed all afternoon. Titles were passed like salt. Across from me, Aunt Teresa performed a small aria about a scholarship committee. To my left, Uncle Martin recited a line about inflation that had the cadence of a joke but not the content. The chandelier hummed its neutral song. My mother took her seat at the head with the posture of a person for whom chairs adjust themselves. She glanced down the table once the way a conductor checks a section, and then her gaze paused on me as if she had reached a page in the score she preferred to skip. "So, Lena," she said, voice, even, glass, catching the light at her fingertips. "Are you still doing computer work?" She left a pause between doing and computer to let the room place the words on whatever shelf it liked. Cutlery clicked. A teenager at the far end scrolled with both thumbs under the tablecloth until his mother tapped his wrist. "Yes," I said, still. "What does that mean?" Her smile for the others lived on her mouth, but not her eyes. "To be clear." The last two words were a habit from morning rounds. "I run a design and AI interface studio," I said. "We build products that learn from how people actually use them, not how we imagine they should." Aunt Teresa offered a fonded, "How creative," as if I'd presented a centerpiece. My mother lifted her water, considered it, and set it down on a coaster already exactly centered. "Very modern," she said. "And how does one measure success in that kind of endeavor?" The word endeavor landed like a paperweight. I kept my hands in my lap. "By whether it works," I said, "and whether it respects the person it's supposed to help." A mild chuckle moved through the table, the way flirtations sometimes do, touching no one for long. My father glanced at my mother, a quick reconnaissance. Daniel buttered a roll with the precision of a lab tech. "Respect is lovely," my mother said, "not as a compliment, but results pay salaries. In medicine, we have clear outcomes, survival rates, readmissions, adverse events. In law, there are verdicts. In finance, there are returns. With computers, she made the plural sound like a rumor. What is there really beyond? Branding. I felt the old heat climb, less a flare now than a measured warmth I could step back from. I was aware of my pulse without fearing it. Somewhere near the end of the table, a young voice eager, "Mom, can I?" and then a shush. "We track outcomes," I said. Task completion. Time saved. Errors avoided. We test bias retention reliability. We document audit trails. We publish numbers when clients allow. My mother's smile held. "Numbers must be peer-reviewed to mean anything." "Numbers must be honest," I said. "Who reviews them is part of that." The server returned to ask about wine preferences, and my mother took the interruption like a gift. Around us, small dramas resumed: someone's promotion at a bank, a neighbor's divorce, a board seat's gossip spoken with the affectionate malice of people who believe themselves immune to luck. Soup cooled. I stirred mine without eating it. Across from me sat a teenager with a hoodie half-zipped under a blazer, an outfit that negotiated with the dress code and won. He had hair that had not yet chosen a part, and a face that still resented shaving. He looked at me the way people look at a word they're trying to remember. He leaned toward the woman next to him, his mother, I guessed, and whispered with an excitement he did not entirely succeed at hiding. "Sorry," he blurted. Then louder, cheeks reddening when heads turned. Aunt Evelyn." The boy never called my mother aunt, but the family invented kinships freely at dinners. He pointed, not polite, but too surprised to stop himself. Is she Lena Hart?" A ripple moved down the table as if someone had dragged a finger across the surface. My mother blinked slowly, recalibrating a situation she had not planned. "She is Lena," she said. "My daughter." The second word landed with the weight of a credential. "No, I mean..." The boy's thumbs were already moving. He made a small triumph sound under his breath. "Quantaloom right. I watched a panel from the Civic Tech Summit in June, and you said something about consent being a feature." "Hold on." He turned his screen toward the nearest adults like a hearth. Light spilled across the linens. A photo of me on a stage that looked nicer than it had felt smiled back in disbelieving high resolution. Beneath it, a caption: "Human-centered systems at scale building interfaces that explain themselves." The video scrubber sat at a timestamp with my hands in mid-gesture. A pull quote boxed in tasteful gray read, "Ask only for what you need. Return something a person can use. Every time." Is this Aunt Teresa pressed a hand to her collarbone in a way that required no feeling to perform? Oh, how wonderful. She leaned in with the velocity people reserve for names they've seen in print. My mother didn't lean. She watched the screen as if it might confess a diagnosis. The boy Noah, his mother hissed, obeyed neither hush nor decorum. He swiped to an article that had placed us in a list I had not forwarded to anyone. See, Noah said, finger dragging under text. Here. 30 under 30 builders rethinking interfaces for the public good. And wait this. Quantiloom secures contracts with St. Halcyon Health and City Clerk Services. Audit-ready AI tools. Dude, sorry, ma'am, sorry. Ms. Hart, your office with the big windows, this lobby is like on my For You page sometimes. He glowed with a sincerity that adjusted the wattage around him. The phone made a lap with the speed of gossip repurposed for reverence. People who hadn't looked at me all night looked now with the specific curiosity reserved for sudden relevance. Uncle Martin adjusted his glasses as if numbers could zoom. Daniel's knife paused, just a small stutter, and then set down with care. My father's hand came to rest lightly on the back of my chair without touching me the way you might steady an object already steady. My mother kept her gaze on the moving screen until it reached her end of the table. She did not touch the phone. She looked at me. Her expression did something I couldn't map, a quick oscillation between calculation and something like surprise. You said she began that you were running a studio. I did, I said. And this is, she gestured toward the phone, as one might toward a test that had come back with an anomaly. This is what you mean? Yes. I did not add adornment. The room had enough. What do you actually do? Cousin Brigitte tried for careful. Like day to day. Build tools that learn from human behavior and show their work, I said. So you can see why they made a choice. So you can say no. You let users say no to the system. Uncle Martin had found an opinion less malleable than his investment talk. The system isn't a person, I said. It does what we tell it. It should ask permission and keep receipts. Noah, unable to help himself, added, She's big on audit logs, as if he were reciting my favorite ice cream flavor. A laugh, a real one, ran the length of the table and came back lighter. The server poured wine I didn't taste. Soup bowls disappeared. The head of the table felt less elevated, the distance more negotiable. Questions came not prying, not pitying. Real ones. How many people work with you from Aunt Teresa who looked suddenly interested in the mathematics of payroll? 20, I said, plus a rotating bench of contractors for the weird stuff. What's your Daniel? Began, stopped, and revised. How do you handle rollouts in clinical settings where downtime is not an option? The question was not for the room. It was not for my mother. He aimed it at me the way two professionals carve a path through a crowd and meet in the middle. I answered in the same voice, the one we both reserve for things that could break. We schedule shadow runs, I said, with live monitoring, parallel systems, and fallback routes. We do red team adversarial testing on inputs, not just outputs. We pre-brief staff with consent screens that explain the trade-offs without euphemism. He nodded the way he nods when a lab result matches a hypothesis. Do you publish your error rates? When clients allow, we always document. My father's hand left the back of my chair and settled over mine for a second, a small anchor that made itself known and then vanished. He cleared his throat gently, a sound that once meant permission to speak. Your mother is still in the room, and now meant nothing so cautious. Is it true, Lena? He said that your company is doing well? The sentence wanted to be precise. He was trying. It is, I said. A silence gathered, not the cold absence from earlier, but the attentive kind that lives before an instrument plays. My mother's eyes moved toward the phone again and then back to me. Her polish didn't slip. It changed sheen. You did not say she said. You did not ask, I said. I kept my voice level. I was not offering a wound to be dressed. Another laugh flickered at the edges and disappeared. Dessert menus were offered and declined. Plates came and went. The chandelier hummed. Someone adjusted a dimmer. Noah's mother confiscated his phone with a pinch and then surreptitiously opened the article again in her lap, pretending she was reading a text. I fielded questions that had the shape of orientation rather than interrogation. Funding or revenue from Uncle Martin, who looked ready to declare a position. Revenue, I said. We're cash flow positive. Margins, this from a cousin who had spent a year in consulting and emerged with numbers like talismans. Boring, I said on purpose. Clients asked Aunt Teresa, eyes shining with the thrill of proximity to confidentiality. Healthcare systems, some city services, scrappy nonprofits that deserve senior work. My mother listened to each answer with the posture of a person at a case conference who's discovered the intern has read the imaging more carefully than the attending. It did not suit her to praise. It made no sense to deny. She compromised by placing her spoon down with more care than necessary and looking at the tablecloth. Noah pivoted his attention back to me, undeterred by adult cueing. "Do you ever take interns?" he asked, hope rushing into the room before permission. "We post roles and we review portfolios blind," I said. "People earn it." He grinned like a light warming. "Even if we're related, especially if we're related." A scatter of laughter. Someone clinked a glass unintentionally and apologized to the glass. The edges of the room felt less fortified. I felt my shoulders drop a degree and did not force them up again. When the servers returned with a course that involved microgreens and a word no one could pronounce the same way twice, my mother tapped her glass. The room obediently stilled. Her voice found the register she uses for donors even agreeable, suspended a precise distance above feeling. "Let's raise a glass," she said, "to Teresa for the Foundation Award, and to unexpected gifts." Chairs adjusted, napkins rustled. The toast hung in the air like something waiting to be named. I did not bow my head or raise my chin. I matched the room's angle and let the words pass. When the clinking began, my father's glass found mine with a soft, deliberate sound. After the toast, the talk fractured into smaller streams, as if the river had discovered stones it could part around. People asked me about apartments' commutes, whether I liked the new cafe on Maple that put hearts in the foam. It was almost ordinary, and the ordinariness felt stranger than the reverence had. Daniel leaned across the white and asked if I'd seen the new guidance from the hospital's ethics board on machine assistance and triage. I asked him for the link. He pulled out his phone, then hesitated. Later, he said like a truce, "Time moved." The main course arrived steak served in the kind of portion that pretends at restraint, and I cut it into polite pieces while my ears stayed tuned to the frequency of my mother's chair. She engaged her favorite conversational technology questions, designed as compliments, designed as expectations, and distributed them with the fairness of a judge. Everyone got one. She asked a niece about law review, a neighbor about a grant. When she reached me again, she put down her fork and took the position on the edge of her chair that meant she would perform precision. "Lena," she said, and she made my name small to test how it would sound. "If your studio is doing with this," she inclined her head at the idea of phone. "Uns says it is. Then tell me, what exactly is your principle, your first rule?" She expected an aphorism she could measure and keep in a pocket next to other people's phrases. I didn't have one for her the way she wanted it, but I had an answer. "We ask permission," I said. "We say why. We show our work. We let people opt out without revenge." It didn't land like a mantra. It landed like a checklist. She recognized the format. The degree of approval she could tolerate revealed itself in the tilt of her head half. And the risks, she could not resist the strength of that question. "We make them visible," I said. "We don't pretend they aren't there." Around the table, the small conversations had slowed, then built again, not quite what they had been. It was not rapture. It was adjustment. Daniel pushed his plate away and looked at me with an expression I recognized from home movies before roles hardened. Pride mixed with bewilderment. In another decade, you might call it brother. "Lena," he said, keeping his voice under the tableware, "this is significant." "Thank you," I said. It was a simple exchange, and it felt large. My father watched my mother the way you watch a landmark in fog. She did not retreat. She did not attack. She held her place like a surgeon at the drape between living and logistical. "I see," she said. Bread returned unnecessary and welcome. Someone asked about a vacation with a tone of secular confession. Noah demonstrated a video game physics glitch to a row of aunts and achieved the remarkable feat of making them marvel. The temperature at the center of the table dropped from feverish to human. The chandelier kept humming its old song. "Do you ever sleep?" Uncle Martin said, half kidding, half asking for a kind of proof only exhaustion seems to provide. "Sometimes," I said. "Less when we're shipping." "Shipping," he repeated, satisfied with the weight of the word. A server leaned to remove my mother's plate, and she raised a hand palm not quite closed to keep it a moment longer. "Leave it," she said to the server, and then unexpectedly, "Please." The single syllable altered the shadow of everything else she'd said tonight. She took one more bite, as if accepting something from a hand that had not offered it before. When the plates were cleared, and the coffee came in cups too small to be reasonable, my father shifted in his chair and faced me more squarely. "Lena," he said softly, as if practicing alone in a hallway, before saying it aloud, "I am proud of you. No flourish. No ceremony." The words landed and stayed where they fell. I looked at him and let my face register the thing it had learned to be careful with. "Thank you," I said, not performing humility and not refusing the gift. He nodded once the way he does when a clause is complete. The room, having adjusted to a new angle, did not wobble. People rose to stretch. Someone admired the lilies. The teenager in the blazer hoodie hybrid asked if anyone wanted to see the highlights of a panel on municipal interfaces, and then answered his own question. My mother spoke to a neighbor about a patient whose numbers weren't convincing. Daniel asked if I had time next week to talk through an issue at the hospital. He said, interface, not app. And I noticed the gentleness of the choice. I took a sip of coffee that had cooled enough to taste. My shoulders had settled into a posture that did not require armor. In the bright curve of the spoon, my face looked like it had survived something and wasn't asking for witnesses. The room was the same, and it wasn't. The linen lay smooth. The lemon oil held. The chandelier did what it always did, offered light without opinion. Coffee cooled into rings the saucers couldn't hide. Conversation drifted toward coats and ride shares. My mother excused herself in a quiet aside to the table, then rose with the posture she wore in operating rooms. I stood a beat later and stepped away from the brightness past the sideboard, with its regimented silver toward the glass door that opened to the porch. Night had a clean edge. The hedges along the walk cut their straight lines into the dark. Somewhere down the block a dog barked twice and gave up. I pressed my palm against the cool rail and let the air move through a part of my chest the house never reached. The door clicked shut behind me with the soft finality of an elevator closing. Her heels counted the distance between us. She stopped at the rail with me, but did not lean. For a moment, we watched the yard as if it belonged to a neighbor we didn't like. "You surprised me," she said, voice smaller than the one she used for donors. "I don't enjoy being surprised." "I know," I said. "You could have told me." She was not pleading. She was inventorying the absence. "You didn't want to hear it," I said. "Not from me." She let that sit. The porch light hummed a thin electrical cord. She folded her arms, then unfolded them as if her body had offered a reflex that didn't suit tonight. "All these years," she said at last, "I thought you were avoiding real work. I was doing work you refused to recognize. I said no heat, just alignment. That's different." Her jaw moved once as if testing a molar. "I pushed you because I wanted you to be strong. You pushed me into you," I said. "Strength doesn't require resemblance." The yard pulled focus and blurred again. A moth found the light and battered itself against glass. She tracked it, then looked back at me. At dinner, she said I said something unkind. "You did." "That wasn't—" She stopped, corrected herself. "That was unnecessary." The word landed like a clamp being loosened. I nodded once. It always was. She made a small, irritated sound at the porch light, as if it were too loud for the job. "If you wanted respect," she said, "you could have demanded it." "I did," I said. I left. She flinched barely, but the movement was visible in the curve of her mouth. "You think I don't know loss?" She lifted a hand and let it fall. "I know a body can stop without warning in a room that was supposed to be safe." "I know what you know," I said. "And I know what I know." I let the words steady themselves in the air. "Here's what I need if I am going to sit at that table. No comparisons, no corrections in front of an audience. If you disagree with me, say it to me, not through me." She turned her head and considered the lawn like a patient chart. "You're setting rules for your mother." "I'm setting rules for myself," I said. "Respect is the dress code. If it's not met, I go." The insect beat itself tired and slid away from the light. She exhaled a sound not unlike the one my father made when a clause found its period. "This is very formal," she said. "It helps." She nodded once, twice, then again as if calibrating a machine. "Fine," she said, the syllable shaped like concession but edged with habit. She tested another word. Please. It came out careful, not theatrical. Please stay for dessert. She glanced at the door. I will try. Trying isn't the same as doing, I said, but there was no performance in it, just clarity. It's a beginning. Footsteps approached softer shoes. Daniel stood in the doorway, hands empty, expression undecided. He looked at my mother, then at me, then at the space between. Am I interrupting? No, my mother said. We both knew it wasn't true, but she made room for him anyway. He stepped onto the porch and found a section of rail that hadn't been claimed. The porch light cut a line across his face that made him look suddenly like the boy who used to bring home ant farms and label the tunnels. He opened his mouth and closed it, then opened it again as if trusting the first draft. I owe you an apology, he said. The words arrived without gauze. I benefited from being compared to you. I let it happen. I told myself you'd chosen easy so I could feel brave. You didn't choose easy. I chose assigned. My mother shifted. Danielle. No, he said, quiet but sturdy. I am speaking to my sister. He faced me again. You built something I don't know how to build, he said. I'm good at what I do, but I didn't choose freely. Maybe I did once, but the choosing got diluted by other people's ideas of proof. He shrugged, not theatrical, emotion like releasing a tense instrument. I've envied your nerve for years. It landed in a place I had kept armored. I didn't rush to meet it. I let it touch. Thank you, I said. He nodded once in relief that didn't ask for absolution. There's something else, he added, careful. Our hospital is piloting a device interface for pre-op checklists. It's not ready. People pretend it is because the vendor is charming and the dashboard is glossy. The nurses hate it for reasons the report doesn't capture. His voice found a clinical cadence that still knew when to lower itself. Would you consult? No theatrics, no favors. Just work. I felt the answer arrive without ceremony. Yes, I said. On the same terms as anyone else. Proper scope, clear authority, the right to say no to a launch if it fails a red test. Good, he said. The word warmed. That's what I want. My mother's attention moved between us quick bird-like. She looked like a person trying to read a foreign menu out loud without skipping anything. If this collaboration happens, she said, choosing each syllable with gloves on, then you will speak with me as well. I am responsible for outcomes. You'll speak with the team, I said. And with me if you can separate outcomes from ownership. Her mouth pressed into a shape that usually preceded a verdict. She let it soften. I can attend a briefing, she said. I heard the concession even if she could not yet name it that. The door opened behind us. My father stood there with 2 desserts balanced carefully in one hand and a third offered like proof. They are attempting something with cardamom, he said, as if reporting on weather. I thought you might want to judge for yourselves. We took the plates from him. He glanced from face to face and recognized the weather had changed without asking for the barometric pressure. He set a fork on the rail for my mother and in the same motion touched her elbow. She accepted both gestures without comment. I am very proud of you, he said to me again, not because he had forgotten, but because the sentence wanted more air. He turned to Daniel. And of you. Daniel's smile was small and real. We ate standing up like conspirators too dignified to hide. Cardamom announced itself slowly. My mother raised her fork like a white flag and took a second bite. Decent, she said. My father looked pleased as if he had cooked it. Noah's face appeared at the window for a second. Moon Round thrilled and then vanished when his mother tugged him back. Inside the room resumed its theater, someone laughing too hard at something middling the clatter of silver controlled by training. Out here, the air felt the right size. My mother placed her empty plate on the rail and turned to me, not quite squared, not quite angled away. I heard what you said, she said. About rules. The last word was simpler than boundaries, and she took it the way you take a medicine you don't yet trust. I can comply. Thank you, I said. The phrase was not magnanimous, it was accurate. She gave a slight nod, then reached for my shoulder, a touch light enough to retract if refused. I let it land. The gesture wasn't a claim, it was contact. She withdrew her hand before it became anything else and looked at Daniel. Email me the briefing, she said. I will read it before speaking aloud. He smiled into his plate. Yes, Chief. She shot him a look that was almost fond despite itself. The porch held us in a small geometry that used to collapse under the weight of pattern, and now did not. The moth returned to the bulb, and then inexplicably found the darkness and took it. The hedges stayed straight. The night went on being night. "We should go back in," my father said, in the tone of a man remembering. "There are coats and keys, and a room full of people who can't leave until the host stands." In a minute, my mother said, surprising herself and no one more than me. She looked at me without the glass of the chandelier between us. "Lena," she said, and the name held steady. "You may sit next to me." It was a rearrangement of furniture, not a crown. I nodded. Daniel set his plate on the rail beside mine, and for a moment our hands touched in the space where the plates had been. "Thank you for coming," he said. "Thank you for asking a real question," I said. We stood there with our empty plates, neither the beginning nor the end of anything, the kind of middle that holds. Inside a spoon struck porcelain, a signal without a code attached. My mother smoothed the line of her jacket and reached for the door. The porch light kept humming. The night kept its edges. We went in. We followed my mother back into the dining room, plates surrendered to a side table, the porch air still on our sleeves. Places had shifted in the 2 minutes we were gone. A chair had appeared beside my mother's, a small displacement that felt larger than the distance it covered. I took it. Daniel sat to my left, my father across within easy speaking range, as if the table had remembered a configuration it had never tried. Coffee refilled itself. Conversation resumed with less choreography. Aunt Teresa told a story that landed without flourish. Noah, newly phoneless, made do with a linen fold and discovered it could stand like a tent if he breathed gently. My mother's hand rested on the table open, her nails catching the chandelier's light in domestic, unremarkable arcs. She asked a cousin about a child's school without consulting the invisible ledger she usually held against other people's answers. When she turned to me, she didn't select a case note. She asked how many people fit in my office and whether the windows actually opened. They did. She nodded like someone filing the fact in a drawer marked useful. Dessert returned without ceremony. A slice of something bright sat on each plate. The cardamom had receded to make way for citrus. We ate. Fork tines clicked, and someone laughed into a napkin. Noah, rescued by an indulgent aunt, retrieved his phone for a moment and showed my father a clip of a physics engine misbehaving. My father laughed the small laugh he used to reserve for bowling league stories. It made the room feel briefly rented by gentler people. People began to stand in staggered waves, collecting coats, tucking chairs with care. My mother rose last and stayed until the last class found the last loop. At the door, she paused with me, while others negotiated rides in rain. She adjusted the silk at her throat, then let her hand fall. "I heard you," she said, not hunting for a better verb. "You will tell me when you can come by the hospital." "Yes," I said. She inclined her head in acknowledgement, not command. "Good." She hesitated a visible beat. "Thank you for sitting by me." "Thank you for asking me to," I said. Her mouth made an almost smile 2 degrees no more. She touched my forearm briefly, the way you test the temperature of water before offering it to someone else, then let go. Daniel handed me a folded printout on hospital letterhead, a summary page, not a demand. "Baseline for your review," he said. "The vendor deck is in your inbox." "Got it," I said. He grinned with one side of his face, which he did when he was 12, and the model bridge finally held the stack of textbooks. Noah moved in at speed, braking just short of collision. "Ms. Hart, Lena, hi." He exhaled like a runner. "I read your internship guidelines. Blind portfolios. I rebuilt the city bus tracker for fun. Not fun like fun for me." Can I send?" "Submit through the portal," I said. "Name on page 2. Work first. We'll read." His relief lit the foyer more than the sconces. "Thank you," he said, and then lower, with a kind of conspiratorial awe. "Your company's style guide is gorgeous. Tell the designer who wrote it," I said. "She'll want to hear that." He nodded solemnly, as if agreeing to a treaty, and retreated to his mother's orbit. My father took my coat from the rack and held it for me, smoothing the shoulder seam with a thumb. "Drive safe," he said, in the old way. Then in the new voice he had found tonight added, "Dinner was better with you in it." "It was different," I said. "Yes," he said, "that's what I meant." The night outside was cooler now, less staged. The hedges marked the path, but didn't stand guard. I walked to my hatchback under a sky that had let a few stars through. When the door thudded shut, the cabin filled with the quiet that follows a hard sound. I sat a moment without starting the engine. In the rear view, the house reduced itself to geometry rectangles of light, a triangle of roof, the front steps like a measured heartbeat. I put the car in gear and left without looking back long enough to invent meaning. The city received me with its usual inventory lights, cycling crosswalks, counting down a neon sign for a diner that refused to concede to new restaurants. I parked in my lot and climbed the stairs. My apartment smelled faintly of coffee and clean paper. I placed Daniel's summary on the table, set my keys on top of it, and stood with my hands on the back of a chair until my body came level with itself. The silence here belonged to me. It held. Morning came the shape it always did. The office opened with the noise of computers waking and chairs gliding. Someone argued amiably about variable names. Someone else brought in a bag of oranges that required negotiation for shelf space. Our project manager, Mara, peered over her mug at my face and nodded as if confirming a datum. "We're green for the clerk rollout," she said. "QA wants one more pass on the consent copy." She paused. "You good?" "I am," I said, which was true in the plain way that travels. The day took on its familiar rhythm. Stand-up prototypes, user sessions, in which strangers told the truth about what we had built, the small grieves and pleasures of aligning words with tasks. At lunch, I reviewed the hospital summary, making notes in the margins about failure states that had been disguised as edge cases. In the afternoon, a developer pinged me to look at a piece of error messaging that had grown too polite to be useful. We cut its apology in half and made the rest specific. Work like this leaves a clean tiredness behind. It did. 2 weeks later, we gathered in a small auditorium whose walls remembered better speeches than any of us were about to give. A banner on the stage read, "Nexus Potential," a name somebody else had suggested and the team had voted on without me in the room. The fund wasn't dramatic. A few scholarships, tuition help for people insisting on taking the path that made family dinners hard. We had enough applications to fill a hallway. Each one sounded like someone learning a language by ear and refusing to wait for permission. I spoke briefly because the evening belonged to the students. I said their names correctly. I handed envelopes. Cameras clicked, but the sound didn't make a show of itself. When it ended, I stood near the exit and shook hands with people who looked at me with the frank concentration of those measuring whether promises travel. A girl in a thrifted blazer grinned through tears and said, "My mother says I should thank you for the bus schedule," and I laughed in the soundless way you keep inside your teeth. Calls with Daniel grew ordinary. He sent me error logs that read like confessions. I sent back annotated flows that did not flinch. We argued about a prompt that wanted to be too helpful and settled on language that admitted what it could not do. Meetings at the hospital happened in rooms that smelled like antiseptic and paper. My mother attended exactly one and spoke with the concise accuracy she paid herself to possess. She did not correct me in front of the room. When she disagreed, she asked a question first. We found the distance that could hold both of us upright. The fundraiser invitation arrived on hospital stationery, the embossed kind that bruises thumbprints. The email came with it practical. Would I speak about interfaces the public could trust? I said yes. On the night of the event, the hall looked the way money learns to look, flowers without fragrance lighting that made everyone's faces hospitable. My mother introduced me without superlatives. I walked to the podium and spoke until the allotted minutes were gone. Consent as a feature, systems that explain, audit trails a person can read. When I finished, I stood aside and let the program go on. My mother found me afterward and touched my sleeve once. "Thank you," she said. It was sufficient. Months rearranged their own furniture. The office hired 2 more people and released a feature that stopped pretending not to exist when it failed. Noah sent a portfolio that began with a bus tracker and ended with an accessibility plugin that made someone on our team swear gently in admiration. He earned a place at a long table where lunch disappeared too quickly. He sat across from me, hood-down posture better than he believed. One evening, I locked the office and walked to the corner where the wind picks up for no reason. The glass reflected a person I recognized without inventorying. I felt the clean tiredness again, and the steadier air that comes after a room learns a new angle. In the distance, the city went about its business. In my pocket, my phone stayed quiet. I let the door close and the lights dim to their time settings. The windows held the last of the day and then gave it back. Thank you so much for listening to today's story. If this story resonated with you or made you reflect, I'd love to hear your thoughts, so feel free to share them in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss the next story. I'll see you next time as we continue exploring more journeys and lessons together.